Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of I Like to Read with me, your host, Rachel Polanski, and my special guest, Willoughby. You know, obviously, everyone does that cute little baby voice when you have to put around because they are the cutest little squishies in the world. Anyways, hello, everyone. For all the visual viewers and listeners out there, you all may notice something a little bit different. Yes, the hair is straight. If you know me or if you've been watching this podcast, you know that I have pretty wavy, curly hair. You also may know that, as I've talked about, I think I've talked about it, that I haven't gotten a haircut since 2019. Obviously, it started out with wanting to be safe because of COVID practices and not wanting to be that close to somebody, especially indoors. We don't really have an outdoor area where someone could come and do it. It would have to be somewhat public in our apartment courtyard, and that's a little bit weird, especially with then I have to how do they wash my hair and the sink? It's all didn't want to deal with that. And then it kind of got to the point too where I was a little bit lazy about the cost as well, because it's Los Angeles. Haircuts cost pretty much more than they do anywhere else. Anyways, this is boring. Long story short, I finally caved in after a year and a half, basically, of cutting my own hair and trimming it. I really like to keep it long. I like the length, but I had no idea what I was doing in terms of shape and bulk, and I just got to the point where I hated wearing it down because it was just so heavy. And so whenever I get my haircut, which I did on Friday, they also blow dry it straight, or she blow dried it straight. I'm going to give a shout out to Amy at Concept 67 Salon in Culver City. She did fantastic work, very safe. It was only her and me in the building. We wore masks the whole time, so I felt good. And the hair, we are on day 3 of not washing. I've taken a couple body showers, of course. So I just put a shower cap on and try to milk this as long as possible without it getting super greasy. So we're going to keep it for a few more days. It's just so fun. When I have curly hair, it's not as silky. I can't run my hands through it. It just falls like this. But I'm also just too lazy to have to do this anytime when I have to do it myself. So having someone else do it for me is super nice and part of a haircut. So I've been enjoying this, and we'll probably try to milk it until Tuesday. I just took a body shower after I did cardio this morning, did the shower cap, and probably can get a day or two more out of it. Anyways, we are going to do a fun little quiz to start things off. We are going to do only true book lovers will score 100% on this quiz. What's your book nerd score? Yeah, I probably will get 100, but let's see what we got. So it's not a multiple choice. It's just the check things off if it applies to you. You've told someone, sorry, I already have plans, when you wanted to get out of something to go home and read a book by yourself. More times than I can count. You follow Bookstagram accounts on Instagram. Yeah, I definitely wasn't as good about this until I started the podcast, but there's such a whole avenue of it on Instagram. So definitely, a little bit before the podcast, but definitely much more since I started I Like to Read. You've moved your favorite book to the must-read display shelf at a bookstore. I can't say I've done this anytime recently. I actually just went into a physical bookstore. Shout out to the Ripped Bodice in Culver City for the first time in ages. And it's a beautiful, lovely bookstore. I bought a nonfiction book about crystals and essays, which I'll get to reading at some point. And I want to say when I was younger, though, I definitely did this and moved books around. So yes. You've recommended a book to a stranger at a bookstore. Again, haven't been in a bookstore for a while, but yes, back when if I saw someone picking something that I liked, it was yes, that looks or whatever. You have your library card memorized. It's saved on my computer and it's automatically set to log in. So yeah. You've downloaded an app that's connected to your library so you can also check out books on your phone. I'm going to cheat and check off. Yes, I haven't technically downloaded the app because sometimes I'm a little bit of a Luddite with that, but I do use the LAPL Overdrive system on my phone to be able to get the books. So yes. You like reading books before seeing the movie adaptations. I don't have a huge preference, so I'm not going to check that one off because I don't always care that much about it. You have your bookshelves organized in a particular way. Yes and no. At this point, we have so many books and so many different things floating around. But I do have a shelf dedicated to my to be read physical books. So yeah, I'm gonna check that one off. You wish you could bottle the scent of new books. Amen. You've read a good portion of classic literature. Again, yes and no. As y'all know, I'm very into the contemporary classics. Just contemporary stuff that might not necessarily be considered a classic, and I haven't read a ton of the classics. I've read the staples and probably a decent amount, but I'm not going to confidently say I've read a good portion. In any given year, it's entirely possible that you've read more books than movies watched. Absolutely. You've gone to your fair share of recycled bookstores. Not in a very long time, especially as I've stopped really reading and purchasing physical books, but especially when I was younger and just the volume and the price and cost. Like there was one called Annie's Used Bookstop in our hometown that I loved. So yes, I'm going to check that one off. You have a Pinterest board filled with dream in-home libraries. No, I don't. I don't have a Pinterest, so no. You've Instagram storied about what you're currently reading at least once. Yes. You can't stop from commenting on someone's status if they're reading a book you read before. Yes. You're normally the first person someone goes to for book recommendations. Hi, hello, you're listening to a podcast about them, of course. You've brought more than one book on vacation before. Yeah. You've cried real ass tears on a page of a very tear-jerking book. Yeah. You've been to a midnight release of a book. I think I did this with like the Harry Potter and the Twilight stuff when I was younger, for sure. You've written or drawn fan fiction for a book you loved. I've definitely like, especially again when I was younger, like fantasized and like expanded on the universes of these books, but I can't confidently say that I'm like a fanfic girl. You've joined a book club. I actually lead one. You've read a book that has actually made you hungry more times than I can count. You've read a book that a celebrity has recommended. Yep. And you've read books written by celebrities. Yep. You stayed up past midnight reading a good book, even though you had to be up early the next day. Guilty. You've experienced reading a book so good that you don't know what could possibly top it. Yep. You've read a book so terrifying you couldn't read it at night. No, not really. I mean, I love scary shit, so like, doesn't matter what time it is. You've dressed up as a book character on Halloween. Yes. You've made at least one literary reference in your life. I mean, yeah. Or a literary pun, yeah. You've accidentally given yourself a paper cut reading. Again, when I do the physical books, yes, sometimes that does happen. You've read a book with over 600 pages. Yep. You visited a location solely because a scene in a book was set there. Yes. You finished an entire book on a plane. Yep. You've read 3 books in one day before. Guilty. You've called in sick to work because you just wanted to stay home and read. I mean, yeah, I can confidently say that. You've gone to a book event to meet your favorite author. Yep. You've had to give yourself a book buying budget because you have a problem. Yep. You and a friend have talked about a book's plot for hours in depth before. Yep. And you own more books than pairs of socks. I do have quite a few pairs of socks, but yes. So my results, I'm 90% book nerd. Your book nerd score is 90%. I checked 35 out of 40. So I guess I'm not a true book lover, but I'm close enough. Your book nerd score is 90%. You may not do all of these things, but we're willing to bet you have some other bookish habits up your sleeve. Keep on reading, my friend. This is just a fun little quiz. I'd be interested to see your results. Let me know how much of a percentage of a literature nerd are you. We'll link this BuzzFeed quiz down below. And I'd be interested to see if you top by 90% score. So without further ado, let's get into this week's 5 books. First, we have Every Last Fear by Alex Finlay. This is a debut author. Again, just kind of came into my library books because I had a hold on it. I did recommend it quite a while ago because it had shown up on the year's best thrillers or whatnot. So we follow our main character, Matt Pine, and we learn that his entire family has, except for his older brother who's was just in prison also, has been murdered, or what they initially thought was murder-suicide, sort of like family accident, but then they quickly it's revealed that there's a homicide and darker intentions behind it. So as we're with Matt, like in the present day and sort of trying to figure out what happened to his family, the individual lives of the family members. There's a mother, a father, a teenage girl, and a young boy. We get to know them individually in the past, like sort of the events leading up to how or why they were murdered, and all the little pieces that flow together, and there's multiple mysteries layered on top of each other. So while it is like very captivating and sort of thriller and whodunit, all the characters are really well developed. It's also a study into a family portrait and sort of the sadness and loss, but also the different personalities and how we can persevere. It's about, there's multiple tragedies and heartbreaks that Matt has had to go through. Like I mentioned, his older brother was in prison, and how that has affected the family. He's a really great, young boy. I say young man, he's a freshman in college, so we really get to see his sort of like coming of age. I can't imagine the horror of knowing that you're basically the only one left in your family besides your other brother. 4 of your 6 family members were killed and you weren't there. And then it's also, not that's horrible. And then trying to figure out what happened to them and who did it and how, are you safe? But also wanting to figure out what happened. Just like a really good thriller, family secrets drama that kept me captivated and reading for, I think, I read this in a day. I devoured it. It was very good. I'm going to speed through these a little bit. Not speed, but, words, because, I can spend 3 minutes talking about a haircut. But anyways, next we have No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood. So Patricia Lockwood, she wrote a memoir called Priest Daddy, which was sort of like hot in, what has it been, 5 years ago? And so I think this is technically her first like novel, but I've been following her on Twitter for a while, and she is quite a wonderful, prolific author. What is it? Priest Daddy is her other... Yeah, she's written like some other stuff too, actually, I guess. So this is definitely not her first novel. I'm sorry. But this is like a very weird, surreal sort of like commentary on modern society, but like a little bit sort of like Black Mirror-ish. So our main protagonist is a young woman who, instead of the internet, there's this thing called like the portal, which sort of like consumes everyone's life. And it's like you don't physically transport there, but it's this like all immersive interweb source that can help take over your life. So this young woman, she finds out that actually something, she's sort of like, the first half is like this meditation on kind of like nosedive from Black Mirror, just in sort of like what does a society and what does a person who is so consumed with what everyone else thinks of them because of this like society made internet based app. It's like pretty crazy, or portal based app. But then it also, a love letter to the endless scroll, as Goodreads put it. But then the second half, something happens with her family that causes her to reevaluate her life and have to like put herself a lot more in like the human perspective and think about what it's like to like be a living being, breathing human with real relationships like outside of this larger portal. So it's like a little bit vague, but it was very, there's definitely a plot, there's action, there's like a first, second, third act, but it's kind of very amorphous and stream of consciousness and how we get to know our main character. But it's also just like really well written. It's different. It's unique. It's pretty easy to read. I believe it was about 220 pages. So a lighter novel to read and just sort of a meditation on society and what humanity is like or could be like and is like. So next we have Love is an Ex-Country by Randa Jarrar. So this is a memoir. Randa Jarrar is a very proud queer Muslim Arab, queer Muslim Arab American and proudly fat. So she's kind of grappled with her identity. She's written previous pieces, I believe, including a novel sort of already dealing with those, but that doesn't mean by no means necessary does that mean that she's like come to terms with it and like everything is totally fine. But the frame of this memoir is set up as a cross-country road trip, but also sort of she has dealt with a lot of things when she was younger, domestic abuse and domestic violence, and the way that her body was constantly shamed and punished by her family. So she sort of explores these different parts of America that she previously like felt that she didn't belong in or that she had like preconceived notions about. And through discovering these new places and traveling and detailing her relationships with them, we get to know more about her and her personal journey as well. She's very honest. She's very open. Again, I think most of the books I'm talking about in this episode are pretty easy and all under about 300 pages. This was also published by Catapult, which is how I found it. Catapult is a wonderful, smaller publishing company, but small but mighty because everything that they publish is really great. And I took... that's where I took that online class with Rachel Verona Cote, and they have a bunch of other online classes and just like great resources for emerging and accomplished writers and just a ton of stuff to check out there. So she also, the enticing incident that sets this off is she made like a tweet about doxing Barbara Bush and sort of like because she is a Muslim American woman, how that was taken into the wrong context and kind of like led to her cancellation. But like how she reshapes that and reclaims that is very fascinating. So definitely check that one out. Excuse me, let me just take a little water break. Next, we have Infinite Country by Patricia Engel. So Infinite Country deals with a young couple that we meet during the Colombian Revolution. Yep, Elena and Mauro. And so very quickly, their Bogota is rife with military people and just sort of this like fascist country that they don't want to be a part of. So they very quickly flee to America and think that they can make this wonderful life for them. But unfortunately, Mauro gets deported and has to move back in with Elena's mother. But the couple have had multiple children, and their oldest daughter, Elena believes would have a better life if she sent her actually to Colombia because they don't have as many resources in America. So long story short, we get to know the relationship and the emerging bond between Elena and Mauro, and also how the years and the distance have kept their love alive but also kept them apart. And then that's contrasted with the perspective of their oldest daughter, who we meet at the beginning, and we learn that she's in some sort of like reform prison for girls, but we don't really understand why. We just know that she's like meant to escape from there. So that contrasted with like getting to know her and getting to know like her relationship with the family and her different version of like leaving a country and the way that she's walled in versus like they're voluntarily choosing to leave the country, but then like how they get deported back. And it's just, so it's sort of, there's multiple timelines, there's multiple family members, everyone in the family is really well developed, especially as we get to know Talia. I believe that's her name, Talia, their oldest daughter, who once we learn more about her story, I really liked and identified with her as a character. And just that's, identified those feelings. I don't have the experience of having to travel illegally from a school where I was imprisoned to finding my father to becoming a fugitive to leaving the country, but in just that sort of like, where do I belong? But like knowing deep in that like where you are isn't where you're supposed to be, but like, do you have the power yourself, or do you have to rely on others? And like, what is a country and what is home? And all of that is explored in this wonderful novel. And last but certainly not least, we have Homo Irrealis by André Aciman. So I can't for the life of me really figure out how to pronounce this. Let's see. Is it Irrealis? How do you Irrealis Moon? But anyways, it's a collection of essays by André Aciman, most famously known as the author of Call Me By Your Name. Wonderful, wonderful book. Wonderful movie. Mixed feelings about, the Army Hammer cannibal situation is obviously terrible. I haven't watched the movie since all that stuff came out. Can you separate the art from the artist? Whole thing. I mean, yes, he's Oliver, and I just... a lot of feelings about Call Me By Your Name. But anyways, I know that André Aciman has written quite a few other things. I actually had the opportunity to hear him speak a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I don't know at this point, when his sequel Find Me came out. I got to hear him speak in Beverly Hills, and he was, of course, extremely prolific and wonderful and profound. I haven't read any of his other work besides Call Me By Your Name, and no, maybe did I read anything else by him? Maybe I've read like Enigma Variations or Out of Each. Basically, I've really read Find Me and Call Me By Your Name. But he's written a few other collections of personal essays. This is the first one I read, but you can tell like so much of his writing style is still there, but it's like him as a human, but you can tell like how he gets all of his characters and like where he gets all this inspiration from. So the title comes from the term irrealis mood, which are they indicate a certain situation or action that is not known to have happened at the moment the speaker is talking. So sort of this like, when he explores the ideas of like when we visit a location, are we visiting it? The location we're visiting is already gone because that present moment is already gone. We're visiting all the past locations and all our past selves that have been there and all of the past other people that have been there, but also all the future dreams and ideas that we have and what it means to think about like what might have been and all these alternative paths, but we'll never know. Sort of like the Schrodinger's cat also, like they could have existed whether or not we chose to look at them, but by choosing to look at them, do we change them? He also contemplates the lives of a lot of different men as he's sort of like wandering throughout the country and the world and just musing on different things, but they're also poetic and beautiful, even though it's written in prose, very philosophical while also being very literary. He's by no means like proclaiming that anything is like this new mode of philosophy, or he's not saying he's Proust or Plato or anything, but he's got some really wonderful ideas, and there was a lot of beautiful sentences and phrases that really just made me be like, wow, now this is a good writer. Okay, well, on that note, I will leave you until next week. Until next time, stay reading, everyone. Bye.